Hey, everybody. So I've been thinking about Joe Biden, of course, since we learned about his cancer diagnosis. And I wish him the best. And of course, I pray that he has a good outcome. And I hope he still has a lot of years left to enjoy his family, to enjoy his retirement. And I hope that he can reflect on his service to the nation with some degree of satisfaction. And so, having said that, I do have a few more thoughts, though, that I want to share. First, I want to thank Joe Biden for his decades of service to the country. Anyone who's spent so long in politics is going to have a lot of successes, and they're going to have some failures along the way. And I think that's why we need historians. I think they help us to move beyond the hot takes and the recency bias of the news cycle. So I'm not going to pretend to know how Joe Biden's going to be remembered by history, except I do know this, that he's going to be for sure remembered as somebody who cared deeply about the country and who viewed political service as a noble calling. And I might be wrong about this, but I also think that he was the only one who could have beaten Donald Trump in 2020. So I'm always going to be grateful for his decision to enter that race. I voted third party in 2016. I was still a Republican back then. So in 2020, Joe Biden became the first Democratic presidential candidate that I ever voted for, and I'm still proud of that vote. But second, though, this ought to go without saying, but I do want to say it explicitly. If Donald Trump received a similar diagnosis, I would also wish him the best, and I'd pray that he has a good outcome. So I'm going to say some really harsh things about him. I just am here in a minute, but I never want to lose sight of his humanity as I do that. I think I'm called to say these things. I think we have to say these things as clearly and as strongly as we can. But I refuse to contribute to a culture of total warfare against our political opponents. So I do oppose Trump's presidency with everything that I am. And I'm giving everything I have to see his agenda for the nation fail. I couldn't have a lower opinion of him as a man than I do. He represents, I believe, the very worst of America, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But he is a human being. And I don't wish suffering upon him, if that makes sense. What I want for him is justice. I've got opinions about what that would entail, what justice would look like for him. You know, for instance, impeachment and removal from office, standing trial for his crimes, forfeiture of any ill-gotten gains from his corruption as president. But I want those things for the sake of the nation, not because I want to see Trump in misery. And honestly, I'm not banking any of my happiness on any of that ever happening either. I've gotten past believing that he's going to see justice in this world, but I can still work for it. I can still hope for it, but it's not my ultimate goal to see Trump suffer. I want to see his agenda defeated, and I want to see America heal from this time. So I'm not sharing all that to try to browbeat or cajole anybody into feeling the same way as me about it. There's these imprecatory psalms in the Bible that are all about, just asking God to treat harshly our enemies and to deal with wicked rulers. And I don't think there's anything wrong with raging against abuse when we see it and raging against injustice when rulers are doing that. I just don't want to live in that place long term. I don't think that's healthy. But third, I understand that people have mixed feelings about Biden now based on his decision to run for president in 2024. And I felt alarmed at the time. I remember when he took a retreat with his family to make that decision, I strongly disagreed when he announced his choice to run. But what I thought at the time, I think I still believe this. I never believed that he'd be a bad president, even if he was slowing down. I felt that he had become a very bad candidate and the stakes were super high. But I trusted his basic judgment and experience, and I trusted the people around him. And even today, he'd still be a way better president than Donald Trump because he has a fundamental orientation toward others and a desire to serve his country faithfully. So I'll wait for all the books to come out and for history to weigh in on Biden's final years as president. But I still believe his eventual decision to drop out of the race showed a level of courage and humility that Trump just could never show. And I applauded him for it at the time, even though I wished he had made the decision a lot earlier than that. But fourth, here's my final point. Let's not kid ourselves. Joe Biden's decision to run and then to drop out isn't what gave us Donald Trump's second term. I mean, sure, it's possible that Kamala Harris or another candidate might have defeated Trump with the benefit of a full nomination process and enough runway to get going. But whichever candidate the Democrats put forward in 24 was going to be fighting the same headwinds. And yeah, those headwinds included some political realities like an economy that was still recovering from the pandemic and immigration policies that a majority of Americans believed needed fixing. And the Democrats had answers to those things. They could make rational arguments about those issues. But in retrospect, I think something far more momentous was going on in the country below the surface. Politics in the Trump years has become sub-rational. It's become lizard-brained. And whether we like to admit it or not, a very sizable minority of Americans actively like the appeals that Trump makes to their base emotions like fear and anger and disgust and bigotry. And it's quite possible that another Democratic candidate might have defeated Trump in 2024, but just barely if they did. And I just think this was going to happen someday. I think America has to go through this time of refinement. And if it hadn't been Trump in 2024, it would have been probably a smarter version of Trump in 2028 or 2032. A substantial minority of Americans no longer believes in democracy. And a lot of them call themselves Christians, and that's why I do the work that I do. Democracy in America has always served white Christians. But now that the demographics of the country are changing, I think we're learning that a lot of people didn't really believe in democracy so much as they believed in the empowerment of their tribe over every other tribe, and democracy worked towards those ends. So elections can't solve issues like that, issues of the heart, issues of our motivations. They can only push the inevitable conflict that we're going to have back a few more years. But here we are. We can't push this back any further. We're in it. So now we get to see what full-blown political corruption looks like in America, the kind that a lot of countries have come to take for granted from their political leaders. And I don't want that for America. We get to see it. We get to see what it looks like when an authoritarian seizes the justice system and tries to make it a weapon for their own empowerment. We get to see what it's like when capital T truth is abandoned at the highest levels and propaganda gets pushed out to the people on a grand scale. And we get to learn, and this is the hard part, this is painful, we get to see which of our family members and friends are able to look at all of that as it's happening and just rationalize it all away. But we also get an opportunity to wake up. We get to learn what our own values are and how much we're willing to sacrifice to create a better future for our children and grandchildren. So yeah, I mean, I do wish that Joe Biden had not run for president in 2024, but regardless of who would have run against Trump, the fact that it was even going to be close, no matter what, is a damning indictment against this generation of Americans, beginning with the white evangelicals who form the greatest segment of Trump's base. And it just shows us we just have to grow up as a nation. And it seems like this horrific season that we're in right now was always coming. It was always going to be a necessary part of our growing up. And I don't see this as our final years as a country. I see it more like our self-centered adolescence. We're insecure and lashing out, and we're blaming the world for our sense of inner confusion and anxiety as we try to figure out who we are. When I wrote my book, A Christian Case Against Donald Trump, during the summer of 2024, I was hoping against hope that Trump would lose, but I saw it the same way back then as I see it now. Even though Trump won the election, I do believe that we dodged a bullet by electing such an ugly fool as our first quasi-fascist president. I feel more encouraged than ever that America will grow up as this hideous reality of life in this country under the rule of MAGA comes full bloom and we get to see what we chose. So I ended that book with a section called A Final Warning, and I'm going to leave you with that now. I called this book A Christian Case Against Donald Trump rather than The Christian Case Against Donald Trump, because every one of us could add our own arguments to bolster the case. Once upon a time, Christians would have rejected someone like Trump without a second thought. But those were the before times. I hope millions of Christians will make their own case against Trump by talking to friends, making videos on social media, writing songs, performing interpretive dances on the street. The stakes go far beyond a simple election, and Christians must speak out in every way we can. Donald Trump is a predator, an oppressor, a deceiver, a demagogue, and Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump, period. Those of us who care about the kingdom of God must forcefully reject Trump's false gospel. We must reject his dark and twisted strategies, and we must build a more solid foundation in Christ so we can recognize and reject those strategies in the future. It's been said that when fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross. Whether we apply the fascist label to the MAGA movement or not, we can count ourselves lucky that this time it's not only the flag and the cross. This time it's also wearing huge floppy clown feet. Yet even so, as absurd as Donald Trump may appear, and as morally and psychologically damaged as he may be, an awful lot of Christians are buying what he's selling. We need to wise up, because mark my words, a younger, smarter, more attractive Donald Trump is already somewhere among us, watching, learning, and waiting.